AA Bullets YouTube channel.
Hurry up, now tell us why you're here.
2 cars were fired before the 2008 Florida 500. These 2 cars were Mac Icar and Donald Morphy. I'll get to the replacements in a bit. Now to the rookies. Jack DePost is a rookie this season, replacing Rusty Cornfield. So is TG Castlenut, who started last season but is going full-time this season. Speedy Comet is also a rookie this season with the retirement of Daryl Draggard. Now, Mac Icar's replacement is Apple Racer. Very creative name. Chip Gearings will be a rookie this season as well, replacing Donald Morphy. Replacing Manny Flywheel is Parker Breakston. I hope he wrecks the mean green car. Sam Carnish Jr. has come over from IndyCar, and now he'll be racing in the Piston Cup as a rookie. Colin DePedal is another rookie this season, and he's the number 140. Jack Armstrong, Chuck Armstrong's cousin, will be racing in the Piston Cup this season as well as a rookie. Hank Weathers, who is the King's son, will also be a rookie this season, alongside Patrick Carparquier, who has the Valvoline sponsorship. Liam Ingus will also be a rookie this season. Yes, he's Hall Ingus's son. Here is Ricky Axel. Thank you, comment section, for telling me his name, and he'll be a rookie this season. There's also Robert Turner, who will be a rookie this season. Why is he number 77, though? And another rookie, Danny Kerbin. And yet another rookie! This one is Lucas Nitro, who's the number 59. And Henry Wheeler, who will be sponsored by Parts.com. And Ronnie Carson, who's sponsored by Igniter. And Tom Trimtire, sponsored by something. I can't exactly read it. And Michael McDrive will be yet another rookie this season. And there's also Doug Throttleman, who was around last season. And finally, the last rookie I need to talk about is Ricard Smith, who also has a new look alongside Doug Throttleman. Quite a lot of cars have new looks, including Matt Karzith, as usual, Greg Beeple, Denny Carlin, Kyle Bushtire, Dale Earnhardt Jr., Mike Yankee Jr., Mark Carton, Casey Corner, Elliot Draftler, Casey Gears, Michael Cartrip, Joe Brakecheck, Eric Carmarola, Sterling Carlin, Terry Carboni, JJ Traley, Travis Draftville, and Scott Rims all have new looks this season. Jacques Villeneuve, a Formula 1 champion, will be racing a part-time schedule this season, alongside Cario Franchitti, who's raced in IndyCar. He'll be racing a part-time schedule as well. Joey Logierno will also be racing a part-time schedule in the Piston Cup this season with the intent of going full-time in 2009. He'll also be joined by Billy Steer, who's also on a part-time schedule this season, and Jason Overdrive, who will also be going full-time in 2009. Greg Speedland will also be racing a part-time schedule this season. No, he's not Cole Speedland's son. And another racer who's racing part-time this season is Rev Rodages, who's the number 76, and he'll be replacing Krusty Rotor whenever he retires. John Speedson will also be racing a part-time schedule this season as a backup racer. And also, same with Owen Wheeler. Both he and Speedson were brought into the Piston Cup by Mark Carton. Tommy Highbanks will also be entering the Piston Cup as a backup racer to Johnny Blamer. Aiden Shiftright, Kevin Shiftright's cousin, will also be entering the Piston Cup as a backup racer, which means yet another Shiftright will be racing in the Piston Cup. But unfortunately, Krusty Rotor will be dropping back to a part-time schedule, and he'll be retiring at the end of the season. Some other cars that will be retiring are Dale Carrett, who will retire at some point this season, Sage Vanderspin, who will be retiring at the end of the season. Other cars retiring at the end of the season are Johnny Blamer, Davey Apex, Ward Burnton, Kenny Shiftright, Rudy Washtire, Brielle Dustfield, Eric Goodcar, and Oliver Engines. We'll miss you after this season. Now onto the teams. DEI, which has merged with Gear Racing, now has 9 cars! How does any team have 9 cars? And Pancake Shift Right Racing also has 9 cars! And are thinking of adding a 10th! How? Rush Racing still has the same 6 cars as last season, but Matt Karzith and Greg Beeple changed their looks once again. Chevrolet Motorsports has gotten rid of Kyle Busch-Tire, but they've added Dale Earnhardt Jr. to their team. Speedson Racing, to deal with the retirement of Brush Kerber, has added Colin DePedal. Joe Gears Racing now has Kyle Busch-Tire in the team, JJ Traley is out, and Joey Logierno, the part-timer, who's now in. But unfortunately for Joe Gears Racing, Tony Gasworth is thinking of leaving at the end of the season to make his own team. That was long. Now on to Chip Carnassi Racing, who adds Cario Franchini to their team. Reverham Motorsports has the same 4 cars since late 2006, but Casey Corner and Elliott Draftler have new looks. Richard Chilpaints Racing is the exact same as last season. Michael Cartrip Racing is now a 4-car team with Michael McDrivewell joining them. Violin Racing is also exactly the same as last season, and Blaster Charger Racing. How is this team still going? No one ever qualifies! And even that. Zachary Drifter quit, which makes Nick Charger the owner again. The Crazy Eights team apparently adds a car, even though the team's in the middle of collapsing. I don't get it. Bill Drivers Racing adds 2 cars, also in the middle of collapsing. Alloy Wilson Racing just sticks with the same 2 cars, being Mark Burnsley and Rudy Washtire. The Anti-Chick Hicks team. Kyle Traxon found a replacement with Henry Wheeler. I don't get it. Red Bull Racing is now a separate team with Brian Vickars and AJ Carmadinger. Wood Brothers Racing only has Speedy Comet now, since Daryl Dragon retired. Dynaco Motorsports still only has Cal Weathers. Strip Weathers Racing only has Bobby Carboni. And a new team, Lucas Nitro Racing, with Lucas Nitro. Yes, he's also an owner, but unfortunately before the Florida 500. Buck Schooner would get lost! Hank Weathers would get sick! Oh no! Now they have to miss the race, but unfortunately, Lee Revkins, the car that started first last season, David Gillicar, Sterling Carlin, Floyd Movelhill, Johnny Blamer, Bobby Carboni, Ruby Easy Oaks, Doug Throttleman, Slider Petrolski, Jeremy Carfield will all be out for a single race, but Reed Sorenkar will be out for 4 races. This is because of Kyle Traxon, who will be suspended for 14 races because of what he did. Lightning McQueen will start at pole position for the 2008 Florida 500, and Michael Cartrip, a 2-time Florida 500 winner, will start on his outside. Road 2 has Denny Carlin and Cal Weathers. Both were rookies in 2006. Row 3 has Tony Gaswood on the inside, someone who's never won the Florida 500, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. to his outside. Row 4 has the Rocket, Ryan Newcar, and 3-time Florida 500 winner, Jeff Gorvette, to his outside. Row 5 has Casey Gears and Casey Corner. Neither have won a race in a little while. Row 6 has Carl Edwards, and to his outside, Mark Carton, who's running another part-time schedule this season. Row 7 has Sage Vanderspin and David Brakar, who qualified for the majority of races last season. Row 8 has a rookie from 2007, Juan Pablo Montoya, and Kevin Carvick, last year's Florida 500 winner. Row 9 has Bobby Swift and Greg Beeple, who's changed his look for this season. Row 10 has Brick Yardley, who won 2 races last season, and Dale Cart, who's thinking of retiring, to his outside. Row 11 has Morey Clutchburn, the 1989 Piston Cup champion, and Kevin Shiftright, to his outside. Row 12 has Brian Vickars and Kyle Busch-Tire, who's won 2 races. Row 13 has Martin Karks Jr., who got his first win last season, and Todd Marcus to his outside. Row 14 is Ernie Gearson and Matt Karzith, who usually does terrible in qualifying. Row 15 has Ricard Smith and, surprisingly, Brick Hicks, who's never qualified for a Florida 500 before. Row 16 is Clint Bokar and T.G. Castlenut to his outside. Row 17 has Chuck Hicks and Speedy Comet. I hope he doesn't crash. Row 18 is Elliott Draftler and Jeff Burnton to his outside. He'll probably jump over someone. Row 19 is Krusty Rotor, who complained about engine failures, and Jamie McCarry to his outside. Row 20 has Chip Gearings and Mike Yankee Jr. starting in 40th position. Row 21 has Ryan Thunderbolt Jr., who left Kyle Traxon behind, and Eugene Komareski, and starting in 43rd is Kurt Busch Tire, what are you doing all the way in the back? And here are some of the cars that failed to qualify for this race. And that's way too many cars! Like Winford, Bradford, Rutherford. And Oliver Engines. It's been 10 minutes, now let's get on to the race. Lightning McQueen will lead for the first 3 laps of the race before he'd lose the lead to Denny Carlin, who would only lead until lap 5, where his teammate Tony Gassworth would take the lead from him. He'd lead for 9 laps before Denny Carlin would retake the lead. He'd lead for the next 2 laps before he'd lose the lead to Jeff Gorvette. Jeff Gorvette would lead until lap 20, where Denny Carlin once again retakes the lead, where he'd lead until lap 36, where Lightning McQueen would retake the lead. He'd lead until lap 40, where Kyle Busch Tire would take the lead. He'd lead for the next 9 laps before his teammate Denny Carlin would take the lead from him. He'd lead until lap 54, where his teammate Kyle Busch Tire would once again take the lead. He'd lead until lap 62, where Cal Weathers would take the lead from him. He'd lead until lap 65, where once again, Denny Carlin takes the lead. And he'd lead until lap 68, where his teammate Kyle Busch Tire would once again take the lead for himself. But on lap 74, Lightning McQueen would once again retake the lead, leading until lap 81, where Jeff Gorvette would pass him for the lead. But Jeff Gorvette would only lead for a singular lap because Kevin Shiftright would take it from him. But he'd only lead for 2 laps before his teammate Kurt Busch Tire would take the lead from him, leading for 10 laps before his younger brother Kyle would take the lead from him. He'd lead until lap 107, where Matt Karseth would take the lead from him. He'd lead until lap 108, where his own teammate Greg Beeple would take the lead from him. He'd lead until lap 110, where Kyle Busch Tire once again takes the lead, leading for 10 laps before the Rocket Ryan Newcar would take the lead from him. He'd lead for only 1 lap because Greg Beeple would take the lead from him. He'd lead for 2 laps before Michael Cartrip would take the lead for himself, leading his first lap of the race. But Ryan Newcar, the Rocket, would retake the lead on lap 124. But on lap 125, Kyle Busch Tire would retake the lead, leading all the way until lap 162. Krusty Rotor would be out on lap 141 because of an engine failure. Dale Earnhardt Jr. would take the lead on lap 162, but he'd lose it 6 laps later to Casey Corner, who would lead until lap 170, only for 2 laps. But then Tony Gassworth would retake the lead, leading until lap 171, where Dale Earnhardt Jr. would retake the lead, leading all the way until lap 188, where Clint Bokar would take the lead from him. He'd lead until lap 191, where Bobby Swift would take it from him. He'd lead for 4 laps before Jeff Burnton, probably jumping over Bobby Swift, would take the lead, losing it on lap 202 to Jeff Gorvette, who would lead all the way until lap 210, where Lightning McQueen would retake the lead for himself, leading until lap 231. But unfortunately, Jack Hicks is 16th as of lap 222 when he wrecks. Murray Clutchburn, why? Ryan Thunderbolt Jr. and David Raycar, why? Mean Green Car. Tony Gassworth would take the lead on lap 231 and then lose it on lap 273 to Kyle Busch Tire, who'd only lead for 2 laps before Kevin Shiftright would retake the lead, leading for 3 laps before Denny Carlin would once again retake the lead, leading for 2 laps before Greg Beeple would take the lead for himself, leading until lap 283, where Cal Weathers would take the lead from him. He'd lead for 5 laps before Jeff Gorvette would take the lead from him. He'd lead for 2 laps, but unfortunately, Chuck Hicks is second as of lap 290, where he wrecks the leader Jeff Gorvette. Why? Mike Yankee Jr. would take the lead after the restart, but he'd lose the lead on lap 292 to Kyle Busch Tire, who would lead for 4 laps. But then, Michael Cartrip would retake the lead, leading until lap 299, where Lightning McQueen would once again take the lead. He'd lead for 5 laps before Denny Carlin would take the lead once again, leading for 2 laps before Greg Beeple would be back in the lead, leading for only 2 laps. But then, Lightning McQueen would retake the lead, leading until lap 311, where Kevin Shiftright would retake the lead once again, leading until lap 317, where Dale Earnhardt Jr. would make a 3-wide pass for the lead, but he'd lose the lead on lap 321 to Kyle Busch-Tire, who used the wall. He'd keep the lead until lap 324. Chick Hicks is 29th as of lap 324. When he wrecks Casey Gears, Matt Karseth, Ricard Smith, and Speedy Comet. Why? The Rocket, Ryan Newcar, would take the lead after the restart, leading for 2 laps before Carl Edwards would take the lead for himself, leading until lap 330, where Denny Carlin would take the lead from him. He'd lead for 6 laps before Lightning McQueen would take the lead from him. He'd lead until lap 342, where Bobby Swift would take the lead from him. But he'd only lead for 4 laps before Greg Beeple would take the lead, leading for a whole 8 laps before Cal Weathers would retake the lead, leading until lap 358, where, once again, Kyle Busch-Tire takes the lead. But on lap 365, his older brother Kurt would take the lead from him, leading until lap 369, where Kevin Shiftwright would take the lead from him. He'd lead until lap 372, where one of his other teammates, Ryan Newcar, would take the lead from him. But on lap 375, the Rocket would lose the lead to the jumper, Jeff Burnton. But then he'd lose the lead on lap 377 to Lightning McQueen, who'd keep the lead for 20 laps. But on lap 397, Dale Earnhardt Jr. would take the lead from him. On lap 402, when everyone went to go pit, Mike Yankee Jr. would take the lead for just 1 lap. But Carl Edwards would get bumped into the wall on lap 402 by Chicax! Why? And then Cal Weathers would take the lead after the restart, where he'd lead for 5 laps. Eugene Kobareski would be 16th as of lap 405, where he wrecks the Mean Green car Chicax! Hooray! Now he's out! But the Mean Green car says this to Eugene Kobareski, and Eugene Kobareski responds with this. Lightning McQueen would take the lead on lap 408 and keep it until lap 415, where Kyle Busch-Tire once again would take the lead, keeping it until lap 418, where his teammate Denny Carlin would take the lead from him. He'd lead until lap 423, where Kevin Shiftwright would take the lead from him, leading until lap 428, where Tony Gasworth would be back in the lead, leading for 9 laps before Kurt Busch-Tire would take the lead from him. He'd only lead for 2 laps before Carl Edwards would once again take the lead, leading until lap 444, where Dale Earnhardt Jr. would take the lead from him, leading for a full 12 laps before Lightning McQueen would retake the lead once again, leading until lap 463, where Kevin Shiftwright would take the lead. He'd only keep the lead for 4 laps though, because Ryan Newcar, the Rocket, would take it from him. But on lap 474, another blue car, Cal Weathers, would take the lead from him. On lap 481, Clint Bokar would be back in the lead, leading until lap 483, where Lightning McQueen would take the lead from him. But he only lead for 2 laps, because Kevin Shiftwright would take the lead on lap 485, where he'd lead for 10 laps before Jeff Burnton would jump over him for the lead, leading until lap 497, where Tony Gasworth would take the lead. And he'd lead the field into the white flag, where Ryan Newcar would take the lead on turn 2. But, out of nowhere, Brick Yardley would take the lead, leading for the final 2 turns to win the 2008 Florida 500. And here is the photo finish, where Brick Yardley only beat Ryan Newcar by 8 feet. And of course, Ryan Newcar would finish second. Bobby Swift would finish third, Kurt Busch-Tire fourth, Lightning McQueen fifth, Kevin Shiftwright sixth, Tony Gasworth seventh, Kyle Busch-Tire eighth, Elliott Draftler, who led no laps, in ninth, and Casey Corner rounding out the top 10. And here is the top 20 of the Florida 500, with Mike Yankee Jr. just barely missing out, finishing 11th. Denny Carlin's nowhere to be seen here.
Remember to press the notifications button, which goes ring, ring, ring after you press it. And lightning strikes back, and that's as if you subscribed, of course. And thank you for watching this entire video.
When I said Denny Carlin was nowhere to be seen, He's just absent from the top 20 despite the fact he led plenty of laps. And also, Chip Gearings and Brick Hicks surprised everyone when they finished in the top 20, considering that neither of them have ever raced in a Florida 500. The 2008 Piston Cup races 2-35 Part 1 should be out tomorrow. If not then it's the next day.